Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. We answer your Minnesota Vikings roster questions next on the Minnesota Football Party.
Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Football Party.
Hello. It's a Reggie Wilson Wednesday, the Mailbag edition on Locked On Sports Minnesota. It's the Minnesota Football Party. Welcome in, one and all. I'm Sam Ekstrom. That's Luke Inman, at Luke_Spinman on Twitter, and that's Reggie Wilson, at Reggie Wilson TV. He's the KARE 11 sports director and anchor. He joins us every Wednesday and Friday on Locked On Sports Minnesota. So much to get to. We've got your fan questions coming in and some good ones today, including Justin Jefferson's contract. What's the deal there? That outlook on some edge rushers. Questions about DJ Wonum and Marcus Davenport. What cut down day mistakes have the Vikings made in the past? And a look at the QB depth chart now that they've added a fourth arm in Jordan Ta'amu. All of that, plenty more on today's Minnesota Football Party, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started. And we should get started right away because a plethora of questions have come in. Everybody wants to talk about this Vikings roster as we get closer and closer to cut down day. Let's start, though, with the man that everybody wants to talk about, Justin Jefferson. Contract talks have been very quiet. Everybody's focused right now on TJ Hawkinson with this mysterious ear infection that a lot of people are skeptical about, including myself. But no one's really talking about Justin Jefferson. And I think, Reggie, he's not in the contract year, right? The fifth-year option still applies. He can play out the year, and he's still a Viking. He's not exposed to free agency. But no one's talking about that contract extension. What do you think about that timeline, and might it just not happen this offseason?
Yeah, I thought that it would be done at some point this offseason, but the more we kind of go along, the more I'm like, well, maybe that's just not the top priority. Like, we still got a couple weeks before the season starts, and maybe that is, still something that's going to be on the way, but it's like I'm still just waiting on Kwesi to make that big splash and that first big signing that he has as the GM, and we have not seen that yet. And so, who better to extend than Justin Jefferson? But the fact that it hasn't happened yet, I'm just trying to understand what type of money needs to be, continually moved around, or what the deal is with that, because we just haven't seen what we thought we would see by now. I mean, the deal is going to happen at some point. It's a no-brainer to extend this guy, but yeah, it just hasn't happened. So I guess we just continue to wait. He doesn't really want to talk to us much about that particular thing anymore. And I understand it because it's just look, I don't have much of an update for you guys. It's not done yet. And so that's a thing, but I'm just eager to see them actually get it done. But the more it goes on, the more you're like, is this going to happen?
Yeah, it's so tough to get a read on it, isn't it, guys? Because you're right. JJ, the player, they never give you anything. They're tight-lipped. The coaches and the GM get up to the podium. They're tight-lipped. They don't get you anything. So you're really just going based off assumption. And I think, again, we all assumed that it would have happened by now. And Reggie's right. It still could happen. I still think at the end of the day, before week one, either Hockenson or JJ is getting a massive deal. But if it doesn't, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think maybe a lot of people will be disappointed just because at this point we've assumed for so long it's going to happen this offseason, but he's still locked up for next year as well. And really, when it comes down to, crunching the numbers and nickel and diamond, is it really that much of a difference between 28 or 30 million the next 2, 3, 4 years versus 30 to 33 million? I don't think it's that huge of a difference in the big picture with a player of this magnitude, but Reggie's right. I think it's not a matter of if, it's still a matter of when. Last year, Kwesi's first year, he made a ton of moves starting about this time frame going into preseason game number 3, right before week 1 of the regular season.
Yeah, Kwesi is very attached to his stock market sensibilities. And here's what I mean by that. We talk about him buying the dip, right? He finds players that were underperforming that have upside, and he gets them at value. Za'Darius Smith, who is coming off an injury, Marcus Davenport, who underperformed, Dean Lowry, who underperformed. He finds those kind of guys and he signs them at what he perceives as value. And I think that the inverse of that is what we're seeing right now. Think about the four players that have been in the headlines in terms of contract negotiations: Kirk Cousins, Danielle Hunter, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hockenson. I would say all four of them increased their value last year. Danielle Hunter had a successful, healthy season. Kirk Cousins, 13 wins. Justin Jefferson, legend stuff. TJ Hockenson, fit like a glove. All four of them increased their value. TJ Hockenson, he would set the market at tight end, I think, or at least be close. Justin Jefferson would set the market. Kirk Cousins would cost you $40+ million a year. Like, all of these guys had cases to make like kind of market high-end contracts. I think Kwesi, he's not selling high, but he's like allergic to negotiating at these contracts that are valued so maybe even above what these guys are worth based on what they did last year. So I think he's almost pumping the brakes on all of them. He's saying, let's wait on Justin. We don't know. We don't need to sign this right now. Almost as if he's anticipating that value to decrease for whatever reason. And I don't know if that goes over great with the player, but that's just the sense I get. He doesn't want to give out more like high market rates to players that may not stay there in the long term. So that's just kind of the way I feel right now. And I don't know if Justin gets done or not. Quick on Hawkinson, 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. On the BS meter, this TJ Hockenson ear thing, where are you at with that?
I actually don't have a read on it at all. I've just kind of been taking it for what it's worth, like just taking it at its value. I saw last Wednesday when I was at practice last, Hockenson walking off with the trainer. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And so I just thought that, this was training camp. He's being, cautious, taking his nicks and dings that usually happens in training camp. But you guys got a little bit more insight than I do on whether or not this issue that he's dealing with is more than just physical health.
Well, how long's it been now? 3 weeks for an ear infection. I don't know. It just seems a little fishy to me. That's all, especially with the contract negotiations that we assume are going on in the background. It just seems a little fishy.
It does. And the messaging has been very ambiguous. Mm-hmm. And if they're really that concerned, okay, so 3-week ear infection, if true, very serious. How can TJ Hockenson declare so confidently that he's going to be ready for week 1? Like, he was up there talking about, I'm eyes on week 1, going to be ready for week 1. Well, how can you say that if you've got a 3-week ear infection? And secondly, if health is the main concern, why is he getting in pads and going out in the 100-degree heat doing walkthrough?
Right.
Like, why is he out there at all?
Is it serious or not?
Yeah.
Pick one and go with it.
I'm very skeptical of the whole thing, and his kind of like, he doesn't want to get into details. The coach doesn't want to get into details. That'd be the quickest way to dissolve this, is to give like more detail about what's happening, and no one wants to go there. So I've got my reservations. We'll see how it plays out. Very hard to verify an ear infection. I know my kids, I'd like to look in his ear canal. My kids had ear infections. They had a bunch of goop coming out. They had gunk. They had to like take tissues 4 times a day and wipe out their ears. I'd like to see TJ Hockenson's ears. Maybe TJ will grant that request just to prove that everything is kosher. Moving on from looking in TJ Hockenson's ears. By the way, thank you to Skull Page for the question. This is from Matt Anderson. We haven't talked about Marcus Davenport much. What are your expectations for him this season? Reg, Marcus Davenport. By the way, he walked by me yesterday. That is a massive human. He is a huge dude.
Yeah, very huge dude. I think, so here's the thing. It's kind of like a low risk, high upside type of a signing that Kwesi did with Marcus Davenport. As long as he stays healthy, he should have a chance to do some things. And you would think because of the deal that he signed, the 1 year kind of like prove it deal, just a half a sack last year, you would think that he wants to get paid. He wants to establish or reestablish himself as a premier pass rusher in the league. And if it works out like Za'Darius last year, he can get a bag like Za'Darius did. And so I think if he finds a way to get 9-10 sacks this year, like that would be best case scenario. If he gets more than that, that would be a home run scenario for the deal that he signed. But I think as long as the health is the main thing, because that's been kind of like a thing with him during his career. I was in Cincinnati and they had Davenport and Trey Hendrickson in New Orleans, and people were like, I'm not really sure. The Bengals gave Hendrickson a deal, and that deal that they gave Hendrickson now looks like it was a steal because he's gone there and just lit it up. And people were thinking like, well, they had Davenport, they had Cam Jordan, they had Hendrickson all in the mix. That's how he got his. And then Hendrickson went to Cincinnati and showed like, hey, actually, like I could do this. Like I'm actually a good pass rusher. And I think this gives Davenport kind of like that same opportunity to come to Minnesota and do the same thing, establish himself on the other side of Daniil. Both of them really kind of playing with a lot on the line with paydays to be had with them moving forward after this season. And I think that's more incentive right there to get after it and get after that quarterback. So I'm excited to see like what he does as a bounce back from last year and also as he tries to secure the bag for his future.
Yeah, it's a great question by Matt because he's right. Like he's kind of the wild card of this bunch and he's kind of flown under the radar a little bit when we think about this defense. I think for me, my expectation is he's got to come in and be the second best pass rusher on the team because quite frankly, he has to if this Flores scheme is going to work the way we all expect it to at this point. He needs to become the Robin to Daniil Hunter's Batman, so to speak, be able to take advantage of all the single blocks and looks and just find a way to create consistent pressure because I know a lot's been made about those sack numbers like Reggie mentioned, but at the end of the day, especially in this kind of defense, I think it's more about finding guys that can get after the quarterback more than just tallying up the sacks, I guess, at the end of the day. And don't get me wrong, like, hey, I'll take a 12-sack season from him all day. Sure, you got it. But the Flores philosophy is all about confusing the quarterback to the line of scrimmage first and foremost, and then forcing those guys to make fast, quick decisions, get the ball out quickly, because the more that happens, the more those DBs in the back can start, okay, we can start trusting the pass rush and knowing these balls are getting out within 2.5, 3 seconds every time. That leads to them jumping more routes. It leads to them playing tighter coverage. It leads to more splash plays. Everyone starts doing their job. Everybody wins. So end of the day, I think the sack numbers are kind of like TDs in the fact that they can be very volatile, very inconsistent week to week, season to season. But as long as he's creating that consistent pressure, the defense is going to have a chance to succeed. And if we've learned one thing, too, by the way, under Flores, it's that everybody's going to get their turn in this front seven, and even the safeties for that matter, to rack up some big numbers throughout this entire season. So, yeah, expectations, I don't know, number what, 8.5 sacks? I mean, the most he's ever had is 9, I believe, in 2021. So right around there. But more importantly, I think he's got to put up great pressure numbers again. And we've seen him do that the last 4 years as well. 114 quarterback hurries. That averages about to almost 29 a season. And this time he's got, again, one of the best D coordinators and Daniil Hunter on the other side as well. So he needs to be that complementary piece for sure.
And Sam, I think what's interesting is I think this front seven is going to anchor this defense because there's so many question marks on that back end. You know, you got Harry back there, you got Bynum back there, but, you know, you got Big Harrison Phillips down there on the defensive line, and then you got Hunter on one side, Davenport on the other side. Wonum has had success as well. And so when you kind of think about that front seven, I feel like those guys are going to kind of control the tempo and the pace on defense. And then the back end will kind of go as they lead. But if they're getting like legit pressure, Byron Murphy is a guy who kind of likes to gamble a little bit sometimes. And I think if they are able to get the type of pressure that even the defense last year had, or something similar, or maybe even better, we'll see. I think that's going to make a very opportunistic secondary feast back there.
Yeah, it could be a little feast or famine too with some of that single coverage that they leave themselves in, but it's going to be fun to watch. To my eye, Marcus Davenport has looked really good this camp. There's no reason he can't be a successful 3-down player. With his size, he should be able to stop the run a little more effectively than he has in his career, and he's such an anomaly. Last year, 34 pressures and half a sack. You look at the other players that had that pressure total in the league, it's 6, 7, 9, 10 sacks. Like the conversion rate from pressure to sack was so anomalous for Marcus Davenport. And the crazy thing is, no one talks about this. This has happened to him 2 out of 3 years, because Luke mentioned he had the big 9-sack season in 21. But in 2020, the same thing happened to him. He had 34 pressures, the exact same number, and only 2 sacks. And again, look at the guys around him. 9, 7, 6. Like, we could be looking at an explosion from Marcus Davenport just by like positive regression to the mean. Just converting at a normal rate should get him easy 7 sacks this year. I think that 8.5 number is pretty nice that Luke threw out.
If he's creating that much pressure, Sam, and he's not tallying up the sacks, that means he's creating some pressure and setting somebody else up for some big numbers, just to, the cleanup sacks, like we like to call them, whether that's Harrison Phillips or a Dean Laurie. As long as the pressures are there, somebody's going to start racking up those sacks for sure.
And a quick follow-up question from Adam Feist on this. There haven't been any reports about DJ Wonum from training camp, yet he hasn't played during the preseason. How has he looked? My answer to that would be he's received a lot of trust from this coaching staff. He's been the number 3 guy all the way through. He was the number 2 guy until Daniil ended the hold-in. And I don't know if it's a competition between him and Patrick Jones. I think that DJ Wonum is your number 3 edge rusher. And in fact, they're going to use him on the field in some 3-man sets with Davenport inside, Wonum and Hunter on the outsides. And he's going to be out there in specific pass rushing situations. I think they got more out of him last year than the Mike Zimmer coaching staff did, I would say. I think that he's on a positive trajectory. And he brings a little experience and athleticism to that group. I've got my worries about him, but Reg, I don't think he's a bad player. I mean, I think he's in his 4th year. This is kind of make or break for him, but I think he's fine. That's kind of where I'm at with DJ.
Yeah, I don't think he's the guy that you are relying on to get you double-digit sacks or anything like that. But he has been a productive player in this defense, and we thought that when we lost Coach Patterson here in Minnesota, that maybe, he might take a step back or things like that. But, they rant and rave over their pass rushing guys, guys like Chris Rumph and who's the other Mike, the other pass rush guy on the
Mike Smith.
Yeah, Mike Smith. Kwesi loves Mike Smith. And so I think he's still continued to ascend. And I think, he, like I said, may not be a guy that gets you double-digit sacks every year or something like that, but he is a guy who can get you 8 or 9 maybe and be a productive player in the defense. And so if he continues to take steps forward, I think he will continue to help this team. And they have a nice little rotation with him and Patrick Jones in that mix with Daniil and Marcus Davenport.
I'm sorry. Are we talking about Vikings 2021 sack leader, DJ Wonum?
Let him know, Luke.
Put some respect on this boy's name. Come on now. I can't speak too much to how he's actually looked during OTAs and minicamp. That's more a question for, again, you guys, Sam and Reg. But I will say he was the backup role guy last year. That's kind of what he's always been. Edge guy number 3. That feels like exactly what he's going to be again this year in 2023. Edge number 3. Right ahead, Patrick Jones. And I don't know how much work Luigi Villain's gotten, but I've seen some clips where he's actually had some reps with the ones as well. So it just tells me it's going to be a heavy rotation this year. They're going to find what each guy does best. They're going to maximize that. We've seen DJ Wonum excel in both the run and the pass rush as well. So I expect him to be utilized on all 3 downs at any given point in the game. End of the day, the fact that he hasn't played much in the preseason, if at all, tells you he's not only a roster lock, but a guy guy they're going to depend on, again, in this heavy rotation in this front seven throughout the entire 2023 season.
Let's get in a quick word from FanDuel, and then we'll whip it around with some more fan questions. Great questions today, everybody. We're brought to you today by FanDuel Sportsbook. They're the official sportsbook partner of Locked On, America's #1 sportsbook, and they've got great promotions going on all the time at FanDuel. And especially with football season coming, they are giving you a chance to win money all year long. Go make a Super Bowl futures wager. Find a team that's going to win a bunch of games, and then every time they win during the regular season, you get bonus bets deposited straight to your account, and then you can reinvest those bonus bets in spreads, over-unders, futures, props, so many ways to wager on football at FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon, a great place to get started. FanDuel.com/lockedon or the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Check it out today. FanDuel, make every moment more. All right, quick answers, fellas. We got more questions to get to. Let's go from at Jay Jettis Agent. Hey, Justin Jefferson's agent listens to the show. Wow. I believe I saw Brandel has been working both guard spots. Can he push for a starting role? Not week one, but Luke, I mean, you've been plugged in with this Brandel thing now for a while. It feels like if Ingram scuffles mightily, Brandel might be the #1 guy to come in off the bench.
Oh, I could see it. Absolutely. All this guy's done, by the way, 6th-round pick out of Oregon State, is overachieve. All we've heard from the coaching staff all offseason is they love what they've seen from this guy throughout minicamp, OTAs, training camp, especially the last few weeks. His stock is still shooting up. Both KOC and Wes Phillips got up to the mic and podium. Nothing but positives to say about him. And I was surprised to see him at minicamp start on the inside initially at guard. I thought to myself, what are you doing? You just found your new swing tackle for the next 2, 3, 4 years. Don't get too cute now. Like, you found a good thing. Let's not overuse it here. But to see his versatility now, both inside and out, and then both on the right and left side, it's been a great surprise. And I think if Ed Ingram or Ezra, for that matter, struggle, he's certainly the A1 choice, the next guy in line to see if you can't get an upgrade in there at some point in the interior. Because we've talked about it ad nauseum, guys. The interior offensive line is really going to dictate how far this offense goes, and in turn, how much success the entire team has in 2023. What another great find on day 3 by Rick Spielman, by the way. Blake Brandel, Oregon State.
Yeah, and we don't know about Chris Reed, if he's going to get back, if he's going to be a pup situation. Like, again, that makes Brandel's versatility all the more important on that. Anything to add there, Reg?
You know what? Our resident Blake Brandel insider, Luke Spinman, got us covered. I'm going to leave it there.
He's got the scoops. Well, Reggie, tell us about this linebacker depth chart, because we got a question from Mir Gando, fuzzy on the pronunciation, but Darren Wolfson said it looked like Ivan Pace had surpassed Brian Asamoah on the depth chart, but Brian could earn it back during the season. I thought Asamoah was locked in as a starter. Do you think this is because of injury or performance during camp? And Reggie, I'll tee you up with this. I thought there was maybe one day before the injury where I thought Pace was actually getting some first team work. And then yesterday at the walkthrough, they were kind of going back and forth with the ones. And then KOC teased it. You know, he said, Pace is not playing to make the roster. He's playing to contribute right away. So is this actually a competition now?
Love that. Love that. I think it is a competition. It's weird, though, because, like, you trust your eyes, you know, and you kind of trust what you see. But then you also know that a lot of times these players are just kind of doing what they do based on, like, because, you know, the coordinator and, you know, the defensive coaches, they're trying to get looks. They're trying to see guys in certain situations in camp and practice. This is the time that they can do that. But you think about it. Look at all the undrafted guys that contributed to some of those teams in New England when Flores had a Super Bowl winning defense that year when they beat the Rams. Like, they routinely did things like that where you're just like, oh, I've never heard of this guy before. And all of a sudden he's playing at like a Pro Bowl level. And look, Ivan Pace Jr. came into this league with a lot of chips on his shoulder because he felt like he was good enough to be drafted, maybe got knocked for his size or whatever, but he was a productive player in college. He was a productive player in high school. And I think he's just doing what he does, which is produce. And I think the Vikings coaches, they're seeing that. I don't know how much to read into whether or not he has surpassed Brian Asamoah on the depth chart or whatever the case may be, because I know they have a high expectation for Asamoah, and they didn't draft him as high as they did, and they didn't, move on from a guy like Eric Kendricks to not have him in the mix. And I think it's a good problem to have, because Asamoah is a talented player, and it seems that Ivan Pace Jr. is showing himself to be a talented player as well. So this competition will breed the best out of the both of these guys, which I think is the Vikings' game.
Yeah, Reggie's right. I mean, you think back to Flores in New England, there's no politics here with these Flores defenses. He doesn't care about the name on the back of the jersey, the status, first round pick, undrafted, you're making $2 million, you're making 10. None of it really matters. So the best 11 guys are going to see the field more often than not. I still think, and Sam, you and I talked about this just a little bit yesterday, I still think big picture, long term, it's Asamoah and Ivan Pace in 2024. I think Hicks is usually, more times than not this season, going to be the first guy to sub out. Older legs, you want some fresh legs in there, give him a breather, lower his snap count when you can. But I don't know a lot about the injury itself. I have to go back to our mindset where we all started this offseason, and that Brian Asamoah is not only going to be a starter this year, but he's going to be a centerpiece of this defense for years to come. So if, in fact, Ivan Pace did come in and just steal that man's job outright, I think that speaks more volumes to what Ivan Pace is doing than a detriment to Brian Asamoah and his talents for the future, for sure.
And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Asamoah-Pace pairing, during this regular season by the end of the year. Maybe that's your starting group.
Yeah, and some 3 linebacker looks too. 3-3-5 defense, 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, 5 DBs on the field as well. Just get your best 11 guys on the field. Brian Flores will do that more times than not, for sure.
And I could see Pace even subbing in for Asamoah in run situations, too. They might really like his run defense. They could do some sub packages, too. It's not black and white with who they have to play. All right, going to cherry pick. We got a couple questions from Don John. Quickly, Inman, knee-jerk reaction. Is there trade value for Jalen Reagor?
Trade value? Oh boy, not at this point. I don't think so. He just hasn't shown enough. I get the question and the mindset. He's still young, still got that first round pedigree. But if we gave up a 5th and a 4th last year, asking for anything more than a 7th, to be honest, and that a conditional at that in 2026 or whatever it may be, is probably the most you could ever hope for.
And then Reggie, the other question from Don John, Jaron Hall and Jordan Ta'amu. Will one or both be on the practice squad or none?
Ooh. So they can keep 3 quarterbacks, right? I don't think that they will cut bait with Jaron Hall just like that, right? I would think that you would probably put, if Hall doesn't make the squad, I think you would want him to be on the practice squad. I don't know that St. Louis Battlehawks legend Jordan Ta'amu is someone that you could kind of like hide away or keep away on the practice squad. He's been around a little bit, starting I think with the Chiefs after his first stint with the XFL, and so I think that might be something where you're like, you try to stash him and somebody grabs him, but I think you want to hold on to Jaron Hall just because you drafted him and you kind of want to see how he develops.
I agree with that. And I think Ta'amu, I think his purpose is just to give them another arm and a backup for Saturday's game. Like, no disrespect to him. I think that's kind of what his purpose is. Last one. And you're forgiven, Reg, if you don't don't have like the bank of Vikings seasons under your belt to answer this one. Are there any players in recent memory who were cut by the Vikings on cutdown day and then signed by another team and went on to have a great career? First name that comes to mind, Marcus Epps.
Yeah, he wasn't cut on cutdown day, though.
I thought he was. No?
He was put on the IR, and then like week 8, the Vikings cut him. Because I'm with you, Sam. That was the first name I thought of, too. And then I did some digging, and I was like, okay. He was on the Vikings till about week 8. Then they dropped him. Needed to add somebody else. Philly scooped him up. the rest is history. But yeah, you go through the list, at least the last 10, 12, 15 drafts, there's not a ton of guys on there that were cut actually on cut down day itself. A lot of these guys that went on to have success with other teams, especially early in their career, being cut second, third year in their career, it wasn't cut on cut down day itself. It happened, week 6, week 8, something like that, after they were put on the IR or the PUP or something like that. So yeah, it was a good question. It was just tough.
I think about T.Y. McGill from last year.
Yeah.
I was just like, dang, he had a great preseason, at a great camp, and then it was the wave injury settlement type situation, and then he ended up going to San Francisco and getting into their rotation. So yeah, I thought that was a player that maybe they should have held on to.
Kurt Coleman is in my brain. Was Kurt Coleman a one-time Viking? Kurt Coleman was signed 2014 and then released on cutdown day. Kurt Coleman went on to have a pretty good career as a safety for the Panthers and then Saints and then Bills.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. I mean, that's and that wasn't a draft pick. That was someone that they signed after a journeyman stretch.
Kurt Coleman from Dayton, Ohio. Yes.
Ooh, good pull.
Hey,
there's not a ton of examples. Okay. Vikings have generally had pretty good judgment.
Really not.
But comment below if we forgot somebody. There's probably they cut Mike Remmers. Mike Remmers went on to have a career. Then they re-signed him in 2017. So it all came back around. That's the show today. He's Reggie Wilson, KARE 11 sports director and anchor on Twitter at Reggie Wilson TV. Luke Inman at Luke_Spinman. We appreciate you watching and listening. We're going to head out to joint practices. I'll have the reports at Sam Ekstrom on my Twitter account. Vikings Cardinals this afternoon in the extreme heat. We appreciate it, and tune in tomorrow on the football party. Arif Hassan, Luke Braun, and Ron Johnson join the program. Have a great day.
Be blessed. Spread love.